All right, we're going to switch gears and talk baseball. Mike Hargrove, former, at the time, of course, the Indians player and manager, was around Major League Baseball, of course, forever. And now he joins us on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, and we'll bring him up. How you doing, Mike? Thanks for joining us.
You bet. Sorry I was so late. I just now got the email and was able to.
It's all good.
Looking forward to it.
We appreciate it, and I'm curious. When you look at all the new rules in baseball, and especially with your reputation as a player, what do you think about the pitch clock specifically, and all the other new rules in Major League Baseball?
Well, there's a lot of them I don't like, but the pitch clock, it's people won't believe this, but it wouldn't bother me. I kind of like to see this thing. The fact of the matter is, I would I would like to see the pitch clock lengthened by about 5 seconds, but it's my understanding they shortened it. But I don't think I'd have had any problem with that thing. I just I took the time that I took, and it worked for me. And but I like it. The games move along a little bit better, and so I like that. But the other rules, I'm not real sure about. They seem to go against the grain.
Mike, you've been a manager before. What was your biggest challenge in your first year, taking over a new team, being a manager? Because obviously Stephen Vogt is going through that this year. So what was the biggest challenges?
Well, it looks like Stephen's doing a pretty good job. I think the biggest problem is let me think about it, because you have to manage personalities as much as anything else, and I've found that drawing the line between letting the players be players and be themselves, draw the line between that and enforcing your rules and getting them focused in was probably the biggest thing that I had to adjust to. I'd never really had to deal with things like that, but it worked. It worked out good. I mean, I had a good bunch of guys when I was in Cleveland. I had a good bunch of guys that loved to play. They loved to win. They loved to compete, and they also loved to have a good time. Yeah. So, but they knew that they knew when it was time to joke around, and then they knew when it was game time. They absolutely turned it on and were focused completely on what their jobs were.
Mike, one thing I've always wanted to ask you: when you managed this team, the lineup was the same every day, and the same guys played every day. I think you were famous for saying starters are starters for a reason. And now lineups are so different, and positionality is such a big thing, and flexibility, and wanting guys to play different spots. Which way is better, do you think?
Oh, I think starters being starters, they're starters for a reason. I think that's the best way to go. You have to obviously you've got your 2 or 3 players that need a little bit of playing time to stay sharp. But I was fortunate in my time in Cleveland that the 2 main guys I had was Wayne Kirby and Alvaro Espinosa, and they were both great at their jobs. They knew their jobs, they knew their responsibilities, and they kept themselves ready to play. So I didn't have to worry a lot of times about playing them just to keep them sharp. I could use them to give guys a day off. And to keep them energized, and a day off in baseball is more of a mental day off than anything. These guys are in great shape. They're mentally and physically they're ready to go. 162 games, but there are times mentally they just need a day off to kind of refresh. And Alvaro and Wayne were very good at being able to play multiple positions and give us that luxury.
So funny because in those days, to your point, growing up as a kid, you knew the really good pinch hitters in baseball when you were a fan. I grew up in New York, and even though I wasn't a Mets fan, everybody knew Rusty Staub, right? Rusty Staub would come in, he'd pinch hit, and then the Mets would pinch run for him because he could barely move at the end of his career. I don't even think those guys really don't exist anymore. If you said to me who's a good pinch hitter now, there might be some guys, but I would have no clue off the top of my head who they are because there's no specialization like that anymore. And you talked about the guys you had, but everybody knew Rusty Staub, even though that's all he did was pinch hit at the end of his career.
Rusty Staub was always a really good hitter.
Yeah.
During his career, and the Mets at that time had the luxury to be able to use Rusty just as a pinch hitter, and again, when he hit and he got on base, they pinch ran for him.
Yeah.
The only problem with that is that you're using two players for one position, and
That's
that kind of stretches you out a little bit. But we were fortunate in Cleveland that we didn't. There wasn't a whole lot of reason for us to go with a pinch hitter. I can't ever remember pinch hitting anybody for Albert Belle or Jim Thome. So it was a little different.
Mike, I want to, now that we're talking about hitting, I want to ask you about the Guardians hitting. Over the past couple of years, they haven't been really doing well hitting, but this season they seem to have been really good at doing that. What do you think changed or went into this offseason that's helped them become a better hitting team?
Well, that's a good question. I think the biggest thing is experience. You see Stephen, who had a great rookie season. He fell off a little bit the next year, but now he's back going great guns this year. I think that the experience that they've gained over the last couple of years has had a lot to do with their ability to move a baseball. The Indians have had good pitching for a while, and the problem has been the fact that scoring runs. But it seems like that Ramirez has gotten a little bit more help in the lineup. Naylor's swinging the bat well, and the other guys in the lineup. So I think really that for me it's more experience than anything else, and realizing how to hit in the big leagues because it is a different animal.
Stephen Kwan in particular is kind of a throwback player. I mean, he's a little like Brett Butler-esque, I guess, but like the classic lead. He's a classic leadoff hitter. I mean, he doesn't have huge speed, but he's got decent speed. But again, that's another thing when you manage, certainly when you played, like the leadoff hitter would be a speed guy, a guy who could bunt, you weren't getting a lot of home runs out of the leadoff spot until Ricky Henderson came around, I guess. But Stephen Kwan is kind of a throwback player, don't you think?
Yeah, I really do. He uses the whole field, which kind of goes against the grain of the trend of Major League Baseball in the last 10 or 15 years. Uses the whole field. He's a smart player. He's a smart hitter, and he's a good base runner. I mean, good heavens, when I played, they had to drive stakes in the ground in front of me to make sure I was moving forward. But I led off, a number of years, and the big thing is getting on base and kind of setting the table for the big guns later in the lineup.
By the way, did Tito, when he decided to retire, did he, because like you, he's a baseball lifer, did he reach out to you and say, like, what do I do? Like, how do I handle retirement? Or did that not happen?
No, that didn't happen. Tito is Tito's man. He's his own man. He doesn't need my advice or help. I think everybody's retirement for everybody is different.
Yeah.
I'm lucky that I like to play golf, though it's a money losing operation right now. But yeah, Tito's doing well. He'll do well whatever he does. He's a good man.
Mike, I got to ask you, 97 series, losing to the Marlins. What do you say when you go back in the clubhouse? And we've all heard the stories about how they were prepping and they were putting up the tarps and everything. They're getting ready for the celebration. And then they had to scurry back in and tear them all down and everything. But as the manager of that team, when that game's over and that series is over, what do you say to those guys?
Well, I think you've got to gather your own thoughts because you're as crushed as they are. I was sitting in my office, getting ready to go in and talk to him, and got a phone call, and it was President Clinton's secretary said, "Do you have a phone call from the President of the United States?" And I was of the mind right there, and my first thought was, "Why the hell is he calling me?" And so anyway, it was usually it'd be something you think, "Holy mackerel, let's do." This is amazing.
Yeah,
I wasn't really into that call when he called. I mean, you tell him that the manner in which we lost was so dramatic, and you just tell them that they and they played well, they fought well, all season long. It's such a grind, no matter how good a team you have, no matter how good they are. The season is a grind, and you just let them know that you're proud of them, that that they gave it everything they had. It just, the ball didn't bounce our way, and those things happen. I had a guy ask me about 4 or 5 months later, asked me how long it took me to get over that loss and the manner in which we lost. And I told him that just as soon as it happened, I'd let him know.
Yeah.
And then somebody asked me about 5 years later the same thing, and I said, "Well, just as soon as it happens, I'll let you know." So it's something you don't necessarily get over, but you certainly have to deal with it.
Did they think they were calling the winning manager? Is that why the president's office?
No,
was
I think
calling you?
I think at the time the kind of tradition at that time was the president called both sides. So
Okay.
and he was. I enjoyed the call. How many times do you get to talk to the president of the United States?
Yeah.
Even if you don't agree with his politics, it's still an honor. And but it was a good phone call.
Mike, right now the Guardians sit at the top of baseball with the best record in baseball. They win the World Series this year if they do what?
Oh gosh, they win the World Series this year if they keep their losing streaks to a minimum and their winning streaks to a maximum. I mean, it's and that's very simplistic, but they need to keep doing what they're doing and not try to do extra. And that's a hard thing for an athlete, especially when you compete at that level, to get that idea in their mind that what you do is good enough. If you take care of what you do, the special things will happen. And players, especially young players, get in trouble by trying to do a little bit more than what they're capable of doing every day and consistently doing it. If they just stay in that mode that things are going good, we need to continue to do what we're doing. Throw strikes, stay ahead of the hitter. Have smart base running, catch the ball, which they're doing really well. They'll be okay. They've got a good young team, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Mike, last thing, when Albert Belle ran into Fernando Vina, what were you thinking in that moment, and what was it like? He was so intimidating from an outside perspective. Like he didn't like to talk to the media, and he's kind of loosened up. I feel like in the last year or two, he's finally talking to the media, but he was always, from an outside perspective, very intimidating. But what was that moment like, and what was it like for you managing him?
Well, the moment is I thought, wow, what a great play. I mean,
It was.
Fernando Vina, he shouldn't have gotten his way. He should have just tagged him and got out of the way. And the runner's job at that time is to break up a double play. And if the guy's going to stand there in front of you, you do what Albert did. People talk about that being a dirty. I watch on YouTube every now and then the 30 most dirty plays in baseball, and that clip is always on there. That wasn't a dirty play. That was just a good, hard, baseball.
Yeah.
And I was completely in Albert's corner. Still am on that. He did what he was supposed to do. As far as managing Albert, Albert and I got along good. I mean, we did. We didn't begin with, but we finally came to a spot in our relationship to where it worked for both of us. I tried to stay like a step ahead of Albert and see if any trouble was coming. If it was, and I tried. I did what I could to mitigate that. But Albert was fine. Albert was he was very intense and a very private person. Didn't trust anybody, and especially the media. And there were times, Albert's problems more than anything was during the off season when he didn't have baseball to concentrate on. I don't know of many people that chased down Halloween trick or treaters in their car, but that was Albert.
Mike, I got two quick ones I got to ask now that we're on the subject to Albert. The cork bat incident, did you know it was corked? And just take me through that whole thing.
Well, I knew that Albert had used cork bats probably about 2 weeks prior to this incident, and I met with him and I told him, Albert, you there's no reason for you to use a cork bat. You hit the ball farther than anybody, so you don't need that. And the only thing that's going to happen if you get caught, then people are going to question the offensive numbers you put up. So I really don't want you to use it anymore. And he said, okay. Obviously, he didn't listen to me. So, it was a mess. It was a mess, but we got through it.
And then I don't know if you saw the clip yesterday, Aaron Boone getting ejected from the Yankees game
right.
when he didn't even talk. He didn't say a word. I'm just wondering.
And that was a veteran umpire.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, first of all, your reaction to that, and then secondly, what's the angriest you ever got at an umpire? Do you remember?
Well, my reaction to Aaron getting kicked out is that he has a reputation of those kind of confrontations, which I admire in a manager. There's very few times anymore in baseball with replay that you have the chance to go out and argue calls, and I think there are very few instances nowadays to where a manager can exhibit that he has the player's back. So and what happened? I've never been a fan of the umpire that ejected him, but obviously he had Aaron targeted and wanted just an excuse to get rid of him, and he got it, even though it was the wrong thing. The maddest I've ever been, in the playoffs, we had Doc Gooden on the mound, and Joe Brinkman was behind the plate, and Doc was throwing good low strikes, and Joe was calling them balls, and they were obviously strikes. Joe thought they were low, and so I went out. Anyway, I ended up getting kicked out of the game in the first inning of the playoff game, and I was mad. So I'm walking back up to my office. I usually went back up to my office and changed my shirt and everything, and came back down and stood down in the runway back in below the dugout where I could keep track of what was going on. And there was this big 10-gallon bucket sitting by the door, and I thought it was empty. And I hauled off and kicked it and found out that it was 3/4 full of water. Don't kick 9 gallons of water in a bucket. I mean, I thought I broke every bone in my leg, especially my big toe. So I was mad then. I kind of got over that when that happened. And just stayed short for a few days. That was the maddest I ever got. I thought we were really getting the job, and I couldn't understand why.
Great stuff. We appreciate all the great years of those great teams that you led. We appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time.
You bet. I'm sorry I was so late, guys. I just things on my end just didn't come around, but I appreciate the time. You guys stay good.